Hello, everybody, and welcome into another draft preview video here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and we are up to the Philadelphia Flyers here. They've got quite a few picks in the first two rounds, actually. And, of course, got Justin Giampietro here. He's been on many videos. How's it going, Justin?
I'm doing good. Right as we're recording, it's 9 days from the draft, and it's just been kind of a waiting game for at least 2 months now. I just want the draft to get started. I'm tired of the rumors and speculation and whatever. I just want to see who they're going to pick at this point.
Yeah, as it gets closer and closer, it's like stop with the target, stop with everything, and just pick the players so we can actually talk about who we actually have on the teams. And it's the same thing with anything. Once the season starts, I'll stop with the previews. Let's get to it. But until we do get to it, we do have a preview. Let's start with the draft strategy for the Flyers. I mean, you got 3 first-round picks. We'll talk about potential trades later on, but they do have all 3 and do pick at those positions. Where do you think they're going? Are they going more best player available at the times that they get them? Or are they actually going to be focusing on some needs? Where do you think they're going with the draft this year?
I think it's a little bit of both. In the first round, they have said that they're going to go best player available in their kind of lead up presser to the draft. I'm pretty sure they made that clear. But either way, I think it's always a little bit of both. For example, you look at last year, they took Jetlachenko at 13. That was kind of seen as a reach, and maybe it was, but I think that he was probably in the same tier as some other guys at that spot. Maybe they had Z Boyum in the same tier as Lachenko, and they're like, okay, we would rather have a center because we don't have any centers than a smaller defenseman, and so they pick Lachenko. I think that's kind of going to be their philosophy with their first 3 first rounders, especially, and I don't really blame them for that either. Positional need is going to take over if every guy is basically the same anyway. At least that's how I see it.
It's true. I mean, and the thing is, the Flyers that you can, the first round is a lot of good players, and I mean, it may drop off after the first round, but there are a lot of elite. I mean, maybe not elite generational guys, but there are quite a few solid. There's going to be some solid NHLers coming from this draft, especially down the middle. There's a lot of centermen in the first, I'd say 20 or so picks, where you're looking at some pretty good, especially in the top 5. You're going to get some really good centermen, and maybe even a guy we'll probably talk about dropping to the Flyers. So let's jump in and talk about that first pick that the Flyers have, which most likely they will not trade. This is the 6th overall pick. What targets are you got? There's probably an obvious one because he keeps dropping. Who do you have in mind here?
Well, there are 2 players that I have in this. I've done a little bit of my own rankings. In the first tier, who the Flyers are definitely not going to get, Matthew Zator and Michael Misa. I think a lot of people agree on this. These are the 2 best prospects in the draft, and they're not going to go to 6. And the Flyers would have to trade up to 2 to even get Misa, almost definitely. So neither of those 2 are happening. But in my tier 2, right below them, I have Porter Martone, who is a winger, and James Higgins, who is a center. And ideally, you want to get James Higgins. And there is a reason that he went from the number 1 ranked prospect in like October to falling down some boards, even past the Flyers pick by some people. But he is a great prospect. I think he has a first-line center future in the NHL. He's very skilled. He's a very good playmaker. He's pretty smart, and he's a great skater. Kind of everything the Flyers lack, and they need a center. And he could be a dynamic player, especially next to Michkov. That's kind of a match made in heaven. And an interesting thing about him this year is that he played with 2 players who were probably better than them, Gabe Perreault and Ryan Leonard in college, and even in World Juniors. And maybe that wasn't even the best fit for him. That might have been why he struggled a bit, where he was playing with guys who were probably better than him. And, he's used to being the dynamic player on his line, whatever. He still produced pretty well. He was a point per game player as a freshman in college. But I think it's good that he has that experience of playing with better players and not just doing everything by himself, because at the NHL level, I don't think he's going to be that player. I don't think he's going to be a superstar player, but I think he's going to be very, very good. And again, compliment to Michkov. That's kind of what you're looking at. Who can benefit Michkov the most? Because that is your franchise player, basically, no matter what. This is one of the best prospects that's ever even touched the draft. And I would honestly say, in my opinion, since Matthews, he really is that good. You can make a case with Bedard, but yeah, he is a near generational type player, the way I see it, and some people agree with me on that one. So Hagens is ideal for me, and one player that some people are kind of iffy on because he's a winger, and the Flyers need centers, and they already have wingers, is Porter Martone. And I think he is, again, in that same tier, as I mentioned. He could be a superstar player at the NHL level. I think he could reach those levels. Again, similar player to Hagens, not in terms of play style, but in terms of upside. He's super smart. Even though he's big, he's not necessarily that physical. I think he could develop that aspect of his game more. Puck battles wise, I thought he was pretty good early in the year. I didn't do much watching of him later in the year, but early in the year, I thought he looked awesome. He was my number one pick for a long time. And that's why I'd consider it, because I also think the Flyers still need wingers. Their long-term outlook there is Michkov. Obviously, he's going to be there. Travis Konecny, they have him signed for 8 years. They're probably not going to trade him. And then they have Tippett and Forrester as the other two guys. I kind of view Forrester as a middle six center, or excuse me, winger, and Tippett kind of as a third line guy. And that's not really a bad thing either. He just hasn't reached that 30-goal plateau that they've hammered in. He's going to be this 30-goal guy. When they signed him to a $50 million deal last year, that was kind of the expectation. He hasn't reached that, and I think it's unfair to place that expectation on him. And, if he's a third-line guy, that's okay. I don't want to force someone into a top six role if they're not, ready for it. And Martone can really help that problem and also make your wingers maybe the best in the league, or at least one of the best long term. You have two dynamic talents in Michkov and Martone, and then you add Konecny there, who's going to hold his own for a very long time. He's 28 years old now. I don't see him falling off anytime soon. That's going to be a good winger core. So, yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that if Martone falls, which he's not going to go 1 or 2. I would highly doubt that. He could go 3, he could go 4, he could go 5. There's really no telling. After the first 2 picks, it's going to be really weird. But he may fall to the Flyers. It is a very realistic outcome. And early in the year, when the Flyers were not so good and they were struggling, I was like, imagine if they get Porter Martone. That was my dream scenario then, and it's almost my dream scenario now. I would like Hagens. I would prefer him. Those are the 2 dream targets. I'll get into a few more. Caleb Desnoyers, I don't know if he'll be there at 6. We'll see. He had a really good end of the year, especially in the playoffs. Some people don't see the offensive upside. Personally, I think his offensive upside is really high. He is, to me, one of the better playmakers in this class, maybe a top 3 playmaker in this draft class. He is defensively oriented. I think that aspect of his game will develop at the NHL level. You see that for some guys where they're maybe not necessarily a defensive guy in juniors or as teenagers, whatever. And then they kind of become more two-way as they age and they maintain that dynamic offense slightly. And that works for them. And they can become a number 1 center that way. Desnoyers, I think he has that kind of future. I think that is a realistic upside. I believe he compared himself to Jonathan Taves. I'm not sure I would, but he's a great playmaker and he could be a good 2-way guy at some point. And I think he's super smart. I think he's one of the smartest players in this draft class, next to Jake O'Brien, who has connections to the Flyers in that they've interviewed his coach before, Jay McGee. So they're familiar with the player, I'm sure. And he's an interesting one because I think, if Desnoyers is not a top 3 playmaker in this class, then O'Brien definitely is. He's definitely in that conversation. He's super smart as well. Great playmaker, not necessarily the best shooter. And some people have pointed out that his power play production was greater than his 5-on-5 even strength stuff. I don't agree with that as a knock on his game. I thought he was awesome. And he is, for me, the number 6 player in this class, aligns with the number 6 pick. Some people will be upset if Higgins is on the board and they take O'Brien, or if Martone is on the board and they take O'Brien. But I see that as a reasonable kind of thing to do. Would I do it personally? Maybe not, but I can see the path there. So those are kind of the big 4 for me that I would really be interested in. Brady Martin was mocked there at a point. And while I don't have him as a top, he's right around the top 10 for me. Like, I think he's 11 on my board. He's a great player. And the hype at the end of the year maybe overrated him a little bit. I always think he's been that kind of borderline top 10, maybe actually top 10 guy. Great for a culture. He can establish, everyone wants this guy who can hit and who can score and who's good at those 2 things. Those 2 things are important. You saw it with Sam Bennett in the final and throughout the playoffs. That kind of guy is going to get a lot of attention and going to get paid a lot of money. I don't compare their games directly, but I do think they're pretty similar in that way, how they shoot and hit, and they can be strong in transition, all these good things. I don't think Brady Martin's going to be there anymore. He might go to Utah at 4. He's getting a lot of hype right now. And another guy I'll mention, I guess the last guy I'll mention, is Roger McQueen.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the Flyers are that high on him, because you would have to be really, really high on him to take a player with that, the injury history, which I'm not too worried about, but he did miss almost his entire draft year. He played 17 games. That is worrisome. He cleared up some of that prior to the combine, where he said, I'm 100%, I'm healthy, don't worry about me. But you'd have to be really high on him. I would consider that as a trade-up candidate, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later. But at 6, they'd have to be really, really high on him to take him over a guy like Jake O'Brien or Desnoyers, who they also know, just like O'Brien, because they're his brothers in the organization, Desnoyers. And, I mean, he's a great player, and he is deserving of a top 6 pick to me.
Yeah, all great picks, and I don't know if you're really you're going to be unhappy when one of these guys go to the Flyers, because they're all really good. And guys like, I think Martone, I don't think he falls to 6, but you never know with these drafts. And if, like you say, Brady Martin gets picked in the top 5, that's going to shift everything around, because I don't think anyone's really expecting him to be there. Like Beckett Seneca kind of changed everything when he went 3rd overall. So we'll see how it all kind of plays out this time, because there might be a player that no one's expecting going in that pick, and then all of a sudden you got more guys going later on. So we'll see how that all plays out. All right, let's jump to the back half of the draft, and this is where the Flyers have this 22nd overall pick, of course, via trade. Where do you see? I mean, there's a lot of great players down in the 20s as well. And again, if something happens at the top, you're going to have other guys being pushed down to those that area too. Who do you have in mind at 22?
This is an interesting one, because I've contemplated a lot. If it were me, I would try to trade up for somebody. There are going to be some great players who fall, but for the sake of this and not doing anything unrealistic or crazy, at 22, you never know who's going to be there. Personally, I would love Cole Reshney at this spot. 5'11" center. I guess he's a little smaller, but he's not that small. I think that part is exaggerated. I'm not sure the Flyers would pick him, though, because they picked a 5'11" center last year, and they'd have to be high on him. I would love for them to do it. He was incredibly productive, especially in the playoffs. He almost set records for his playoff scoring. He had 25 points in 11 games. That is very good for the WHL for a draft eligible prospect. And he had a great regular season. And I think he has top 6 upside. Very smart, good playmaker. He's pretty smart. It would be great, but I don't know. We'll see what they do there. I think some other guys, they may consider someone like Blake Fidler, who is a right shot defenseman. He's very big. He does a lot of good things. He can move the puck. He can skate. He has two-way upside. Kind of fits the Oliver Bonk mold from a couple years ago. Not similar players necessarily, but the idea is similar. He could be a good top 4 defenseman. I think that he has a reasonable top 4 upside. So they may consider it. Again, personally, maybe not my pick, but he's a good player and he does deserve to go in that kind of range if he's on the board at all. That's why it's so tricky at this range.
Yeah.
They may take a goalie at some point. I don't think they take him at 1 at 22. I think they'll wait on that. So I won't get into goalies in the first round at all. I'll just preface that now. But yeah, defensemen, that could be a spot for them. They may lean center. Some guys that they may are Jack Nesbitt. That's one. That would be a little rich for my blood at 22. That's another guy, 6'4" center. Does some things well. Maybe a slightly raw in terms of skating. There's some development to do there, but if he does, I think he could be a good middle 6 guy. Braden Coots, another one, if he makes it. Colin Potter, another middle 6 center guy. There's so many options.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they'll draft winger. I don't know where they'll even lean. If they're going to go best player available, if there's a true best player available for them, or if they'll go center, or whatever it may be. But yeah, there are options for them. There are a lot of good options that I think have a reasonable upside at the NHL level. I would like them to trade the pick, but we'll see what they do.
Yeah, I mean, it is a good value pick to trade because teams are, especially if there's a guy that a team's like, well, I want this guy here, and we don't have a pick around that time, especially like a team that doesn't have a first round pick, like the Oilers did last year. Yeah, last year where they trade and got a pick in the first round, didn't have one, and got Sam O'Reilly, which I mean, it's looking like a pretty good guy that they got there. So that could be something that a team would want, and then you can, flip and get maybe more picks or whatever, maybe a bigger deal, which we'll talk about later on. All right, last pick of the first round. Now, this is probably similar talking points about the 31st overall pick. But I mean, you could take a swing for this one. I know this is where you can maybe pick a guy that maybe is supposed to be the first, second round, but might, has some rumors that they may be jumping into the first round. Do you have any thoughts of what the 31st overall pick would, where the Flyers would go here?
They may lean trade again. When you have 7 picks in the top 48, I don't think they do nothing. That would be kind of crazy if they did absolutely nothing. Even last year, they made a few trades, even if they weren't substantial. Like they trade down a spot from 12 to 13, and they trade their last first for this year. Maybe it's not crazy, but I feel like they do something. But again, for the sake of the argument, or for the sake of the preview, at 31, I would maybe consider, to me personally, Eric Nilsson would be a great player. Swedish center. He's not big, but he's pretty good in my watches. He may go in that late first, early second range, possibly. Maybe may go a little bit later. Another Swedish guy, Milton Gastrin. Another guy I think he's got good skill. He could be a great player, middle 6 center, both of those two. Maybe, and this was a guy that I looked at before. I'm not sure if they consider him, but Kurban Limitov out of the Russian Junior League, they've drafted out of there recently with Michkov, obviously, and Pautov in the 6th round, I believe, last year. So they're they pay attention to that league. Uh, they may consider a big defenseman like him who's skilled but is pretty raw and has two-way upside to me. Another guy, I hope I'm not butchering, Prokhorov, Daniil Prokhorov, out of that same league. He is big. He's huge. I think he's 6'6", and that may be a guy they consider for the size, and he has decent upside. He didn't score a lot this year, and that would generally be a red flag, I would think, for Russian juniors. That's kind of one of the lower level junior leagues out there. But someone like Kirill Marchenko, for example, had similar production at that time, and he is a star level player in the NHL now. So who really knows? It's so hard to project that league, especially because so few players come out of there, at least from what I've seen, and become good players in the NHL. Not as prominent as the CHL, but yeah, a guy to keep look out for. They may take swings like that. And another guy who's also huge is Mason West. He is notable because he's a two-sport athlete. He played college or high school football, and he's going to the NHL or the NHL draft, and he's going to go maybe pretty high. He is a guy especially who I think is pretty raw, but there is upside there. I think a lot of these guys, again, late in this first round, middle six upside, he could be a good player. I watched only a little bit of him, but yeah, I noticed that maybe some things to work on. He only played, I think, 10 games at the USHL and TDP level this year. So there's definitely some time to make up there, but a reasonable upside gamble. I think that's what you're looking for here. Maybe they go high ceiling, or excuse me, like low ceiling, high floor, or maybe they look at high ceiling, low floor. It really depends on how they're feeling, on how they rank it. I can't predict what their board is. It's not going to be what the public says. They're going to trust their guys. So it's really just speculation at this point.
It's true. And I mean, like I say, the first round, when you get down to the 30 picks, like in that last bit of the first round, you're getting guys that might be second round, but, just jump into that area. So we'll see who gets there. I know Dayton predicted Philip Ekberg being a guy that they may take a swing on too. Great under 18s. Hit double digits in goals for Sweden. So, little bit undersized, I believe, too. So I don't know about where the Flyers stand on that. They usually like their bigger guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see if they take a swing on him too. All right, moving into the second round. This is where the Flyers have 4 picks. And there again, we could get some trades in here to whenever there's these high value first, second round picks and they have multiples, you may be packaging the first and the second. Who knows? But I keep alluding to that. We're not talking about that yet. Second round picks. Who do you got?
You mentioned an interesting one, Ekberg. I believe he had 19 points in 7 games at the U18s. I think the second round is probably more reasonable for where he goes, considering his size. And in the OHL this year, he wasn't crazy productive. That'll probably go into it. But historically, those guys who produce at that level, even if they're kind of lower ranked guys like Ekberg, they become at least NHL players. It is notable that he was incredible at the U18s, even in a small sample. I don't know if the Flyers would take him, but he kind of a little bit reminds me of Denver Barkey, who they picked in the third round a couple years ago, and who has established a nice little junior career for himself, captaining London to a Memorial Cup and a final appearance, or a Memorial Cup appearance last year. It would be a guy I think is on their radar. Middle six, again, another middle six type of guy who I think has a good motor. Some people don't think that. I think he has a decent motor, and there's some skill there, and I'm not too worried about the size. They may be, so, I can't speak on that. One guy that I like here is at 36, where the Flyers are picking first, is Riker Lee. American guy, USHL. I believe he had 68 points in 58 games, which makes him, I believe, the most productive draft eligible or draft year prospect out of that league this year. I think he's got good offensive upside. I like his game. I think he's got some nice passing skill in there too. That's a guy I would consider at that range. I think I have him ranked higher than most people, somewhere like 24 or whatever. So that'd be a good value pick to me personally. Uh, all these picks are kind of the same. Like I believe they pick 40, 45, and 48. Those are their next three. Again, it's going to be all these guys that I like and they may not like. Victor Klingstell out of Sweden, Swedish Junior League. I think he's super skilled, and I really like what I saw out of him this year, especially early this year. There are a lot of good Swedish guys in that J20, the juniors league, the top juniors league there, that I watched. And Klingstell, I wasn't even really paying attention to him. And I was watching these other guys, and I was like, wow, who's this guy? And it was Klingstell, and he was awesome. And that happens a lot, actually, where I'm watching another guy, and I'm like, hey, who's this guy? And he also happens to be a high-ranked prospect. So, they may consider goalie here. I can't tell you specifically where they may go. I apologize if I'm butchering this. Andreanov out of Russia. That's another guy. He put up great numbers this year, and they've drafted Russian goalies in the past, or goalies from Europe in the past. So maybe they prioritize that over North American. Who really knows? The goalies are going to be so hard, especially harder to predict, because we don't even know if they want a goalie, where they're going to draft them from. But yeah, the rankings are pretty objective, I would say, where you're not there. It's not a debate between 5 goalies. It's either 3 or so you're considering, but that would be a guy I consider, Andreanov. A lot of the same guys that I've already listed before, I would consider in the second round, and I think they may consider size and compete. Those are traits that they may be looking for, and those aren't bad traits to look for in this range, where maybe in the early first round, you're maybe not looking for that, but as you get in these lower skill type of rounds, those are traits that you look for. And if there's a little bit of skill in there too, then that's a bonus.
For sure. I mean, the probability of getting an NHLer out of the second round is pretty high. It's after that you start getting lower and lower, but there are a lot of NHL players that come from this round. So having 4 picks, and all around the same area, like you said, all 3 of them are in the 40s. So I mean, even if you don't get a guy at 40, they may drop to 45, and then you can get both of them in that same range. And same thing, you got 3 picks later, you got another one. So it's gonna be interesting to see who they pick, or if they even pick all the second rounders and the first rounders. So that's a good segue into that. Any potential trades you're looking at? I mean, we've mentioned a few picks that Flyers may be willing to move. Not the 6th overall. I'm sure they're not, unless they get like a ridiculous offer for, and there's a great player coming back. I don't think that's happening. But like you say, the 22, the 31st, some of their seconds. What do you see? Do you see a big trade, like a blockbuster type trade, where you're packaging a first, second, maybe a player in there? What type of trade do you see coming up?
Well, I don't envision that 6 is a part of it, and I don't imagine that they're moving up to 2. I know that's kind of been out there a bit. At 6, you're landing your guy, and you're not going to settle for anything less. If you think, and there probably is going to be, what the organization believes is their 1C or whatever, whether it be Martone, but probably their 1C. Another guy I didn't mention, Anton Frondel. I apologize for not mentioning him. That's another guy who they may consider. This is your guy. Like, this is your next best player to Matvei Michkov, at least you hope, or maybe in that Travis Konecny range, whatever it may be. You're not going to settle for anything less. You have to get this pick right. And unless they get an offer that blows them out of the water, that really excites them.
Yeah.
I should phrase it that way. They're not going to do it. I don't see them trading down, and unless they're trading for a player, and I mocked this before, they're not going to do it. It's unrealistic. But like Jason Robertson, that's a player who is a number 1 overall type talent. Like, yeah, I would trade number 6 and more to get a 25-year-old superstar type player. Absolutely. But that's not going to happen. And I highly doubt he's even available. He was kind of in rumors there for a bit.
Yeah.
But yes, you're hanging on to 6. Now, for all the other picks, that's a different story.
Yeah.
Because if there's a player out there who can immediately help you and also help you in the long term, you're going to do that. Marco Rossi has been heavily rumored, and even going back a year, his name has been out there for a while. He's a 23-year-old, scored 60 points, center. Yes, he's 5'9". Yes, the size is not great. He's the same height and weight as Brad Marchand, actually, which I found funny. They play differently, but I think that's funny. But either way, that's the type of guy you're looking for. You swap 22 and maybe your late first or throw a second in there, whatever it may be. Those are the types of players you should be after. Young, and you project them long-term to be a top 6 player, which you need. You do need these top 6 forwards or these top 4 defensemen. That's what you're kind of going for. Another option, I think, is trading up in the draft. I've mentioned this before. Victor Eklund is a guy that I absolutely love, but he happens to be 5'11", and even though he's high motor, high compete, guy you absolutely love to have, and he's very skilled and super productive. Basically, he put up Frondell numbers this year almost. They played together later in the year, and yet I was reading Corey Pronman's from The Athletic. He interviewed some scouts and executives and asked them around some questions just to get a feel for what's kind of going on. And Victor Eklund was a guy that one scout mentioned will probably fall outside the top 10, which is pretty shocking considering everyone has him in their top 10. He was mocked near top 5 for some people later, a little bit earlier in the year. He's a great player, and I would trade up for him, even though he's a small winger. That's the kind of guy that can elevate Matvei Michkov and players around him, or just anybody around him. That's the type of guy I'm going for. Has, to me, first line upside. That's what you're moving up for. Another guy in that kind of realm, but very different player, Lyndon Lykovic. I also think he's very high upside, very skilled, very big, but not very physical, which is going to confuse people who just see his height and weight and they're like, oh, this is a power forward. No, definitely not. Not even close, actually. That's a guy like Jackson Smith. They have hinted at that. I've seen that in rumors. Again, nowhere near definitive. Jackson Smith, I think, to me personally, the second best defenseman in this class. But honestly, it feels like he's going to fall outside the top 10. And that's a guy I trade up for. A top 4 potential defenseman, can play both ends of the ice. He's very big at 6'4", 200, and also an amazing skater, one of the better skaters in this draft class. So they're going to like that. I think big and can skate. I mean, how could you not like that?
Yeah.
The Flyers they traded for Drysdale a year ago. He's an amazing skater, but he's not big, but they can get the big. I'm sure they'll love that. So yeah, those are the types of trades that I'm thinking of here. You could package the second rounders similarly and the late first and whatever you have to do. But I don't think they like 7 top 48 prospects that much that they're going to do nothing. I feel like that's unrealistic and unreasonable.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I don't think they're picking all 11 picks that they've got. And a lot of them are in that top range. Beyond the second round, they only have a 1/3, 2/5, and a 6th. So, I mean, the rest of it is not very much beyond the first and second round, which have, like you mentioned, 7 picks. So I think they are trading at least one of their firsts for sure. and it'll probably be before the draft. We always predict these trades on the draft floor, even though there's not be a draft floor really. The GMs aren't going to be on the draft floor, but it'll be similar. I mean, they'll be phoning each other. I don't think these trades are going to happen then. It's going to happen the night before, 2 days before, which always does. We're all hyping this on draft day, but never. All these trades happen before that. Already had one, Holla getting traded. So I mean, it's starting.
Yep.
So we'll see how many more happen before the actual draft on the 28th. But thanks, Justin, for coming on and talking Philadelphia Flyers and the draft coming up. They're going to be prominent. Either they pick them, all those picks, or they're going to be trading. They're going to be in the news. So we'll have to just keep an eye on who they pick and who they don't pick or who they trade. But make sure to check out everything at thehockeybears.com. We've got prospect profiles over 150 now. We have that milestone. Lots of profiles to take a look at. All the top prospects are there, even some later round guys that you may not know about. So take a look at that. Also, we got a bunch of other videos on the YouTube channel as well. Mock drafts, features, top 10 lists, whole bunch of fun stuff, the draft guide. So check that out. But until our next video, we will see you next time.